Hello and welcome to the Define Tomorrow podcast. I'm your host Barry Coombs. Today I'm joined by Ross Laing of Bitdefender.
Hello.
Ross, for those listening to the podcast, could you give them an overview as to who you are and what your role is at Bitdefender?
Certainly. So I'm a sales engineer for Bitdefender. I've been with Bitdefender for 3 years now. So we cover all sorts of things such as performing demos of the product, assisting with POCs, going out and doing podcasts, delivering presentations at big show events such as IP Expo, InfoSec, the IT Directors Forum, etc.
Fantastic. So what stood out for you with regard to Bitdefender when you chose to join them originally? That's the thing that's really interesting to me, because when you're out there looking for a new job, you look at various different vendors, and what really appealed to you when it came to Bitdefender?
The technology.
And what specifically about the technology? I mean, we've been a partner for Bitdefender for a number of years now, so I've got my opinions, but what elements stood out to you?
So essentially, when it comes to the technology, particularly being a sales engineer, you've got to believe in the product. And if you believe in the product, you're going to find it an awful lot easier to talk about the product and to essentially be passionate about it.
Definitely. So for me, wholeheartedly, and I think that goes for the whole range of products that Computer World sells. For me, I mean, we've been a Bitdefender partner now for probably 5 or 6 years, I'd imagine. And in my previous life, when I was an IT manager, IT administrator, I've used a whole raft of antivirus products, all the big names that you would expect. And I always found that antivirus is probably the one thing that we don't want to be doing anything with. It's the one thing that we want just to be working, but it tended to be the one thing that was always causing me problems. And that was either a performance problem or an upgrade problem. Now, Bitdefender were one of the first people to support vShield endpoint back in the day, and being a virtualization guy, that was really important for me. You've of course progressed through the VMware stack and have your own technology now to offload the antivirus. But what really stood out for me was the low impact that you have on certainly the desktops. And as someone that's done a lot with VDI, that was really, really important. So is that a priority for Bitdefender in terms of looking at how you're consuming resource and being implemented and that ease of use?
Yeah, I think very much so. Largely because it's one of the key factors for the customer. I mean, everybody wants to have as low impact on the endpoint as possible, and in doing so, then obviously they're going to be able to continue business as usual as much as possible, whilst not hindering the performance of their end users, their environments, etc. And it's important that I think you actually mentioned us integrating with vShield. We've also just recently been the only vendor who will currently integrate with NSXT,
Okay.
Which is a fantastic accolade for us. So yes, we're certainly continuing in those strides.
Definitely, and it's really important that you are progressive. Things like NSXT, that's the future of NSX from a VMware perspective. There was a very big release, I think, last week that was kind of making that the forefront of the product that VMware are taking to market.
Yeah.
So if we look at the kind of core antivirus product, there's a number of vendors out there on the market. What's the main difference with the way that you guys handle antivirus in comparison to the other technologies?
So our key defining feature is the fact that everything is from a single agent.
Okay.
We will continue to follow that through as we do develop and take on board more and more technologies. We always strive to make sure that it is from that single agent on the endpoint. It is a single management console, from which you'll manage each one of those technologies. For example, we've taken on board patch management, full disk encryption, all from that single agent, from the endpoint, also from Gravity's own.
Definitely, and that is really important. That really kind of lowers the administrative overhead. Also means you can optimize to make sure that there must be a certain amount of resource it takes for each agent. So basic CPU and memory just to have the agent on there before you then start layering the other bits and pieces on there.
Yeah.
So you're able to get a saving over and board by bringing those things together. So in terms of the way that you actually tackle viruses, what does the kind of life cycle of a piece of an application running on a machine? You kind of got a multi-tiered approach. approach, haven't you? So we're not just talking about signatures, checking for virus traits. It kind of goes through a number of different checks on the system before it is then executed, doesn't it?
Indeed, yeah, we've got a multi-layered approach of protection. You have the traditional signature approach, and then of course we incorporate other things as well, such as we have advanced machine learning, we have anti-ransomware technologies, we have anti-exploit technologies, we have on-access scanning, we have the patch management side of things, the full disk encryption. So it's constantly looking. I mean, the advanced threat control technology we have really is very powerful, in the respect that it's looking at the applications that we currently have. It gives the applications a score threshold, and then it's looking for any malicious activity from the application. And in looking for that malicious activity and essentially detecting it, it'll therefore shut down that malicious activity and therefore roll back any recent actions performed, which is really powerful.
And this is the technology that made outbreaks like WannaCry. You guys didn't need to update your patching database effectively when WannaCry came out because you were already protecting against it using these technologies. Am I right in saying that?
You are correct. I mean, we were actually detecting strains of WannaCry as far back as 2012.
Okay.
So it was released on the 19th of November, 19th of May of 2017, and not a single Bitdefender customer was affected by WannaCry.
Definitely.
And that's really powerful. And off the back of that, independent bloggers were actually blogging about Bitdefender. A bit of a frenzy came up as a result of it. And off the back of that, an awful lot of people went to the Bitdefender website, downloaded the Bitdefender technology, and essentially brought the website down because of the traffic that we were experiencing. So yeah.
Now that is really important. I think for me, ransomware specifically is one of the biggest challenges my customers are facing. It has such a major effect. I think back in the day when I was in an end user IT position, viruses used to be a nuisance more than anything else. They would maybe make one machine useless. They might affect an amount of data on that machine. It would cause me a hassle as I was chasing it around the network, as it was a worm consuming some kind of resource. But ransomware is now having such a detrimental effect to businesses, isn't it?
Yeah, massively. Although in recent, in the last year at least, we have actually seen ransomware drop off a bit. It has incidentally been replaced by cryptojacking, which is a massive thing. I mean, we're actually seeing for every one ransomware event, we're actually seeing over 100 cryptojacking events.
So for those that aren't aware of cryptojacking, can you give a quick explanation as to what it is and how you may be susceptible from that?
Sure. So cryptojacking is essentially where people take control or insert an applet onto your machine, which is a cryptocurrency mining applet. So they're actually using these applets to mine cryptocurrency from your CPU on your machine without your authorization. That's the important part. Like all things in this world, it started off as something relatively harmless. It started off as a Java applet which was run on websites, so that rather than having to use advertising to generate an income from a website. What they would do is they would install this Java applet, and obviously it would just mine for cryptocurrency on visitors on the website or people visiting that website while still visiting it. Then essentially it grew in popularity in the respect that people are actually using it to install, just to push out to multiple machines at any one time. And I think the important thing about it is that it goes undetected. With ransomware, it's very much a case of it's in your face, you've been infected, we've taken all of your data, and away you go. With cryptojacking, it'll simply go undetected as long as possible. It won't max out your CPU, it will simply just trickle along, and the longer it goes undetected, the more money it generates. I mean, if we were to talk numbers, for example, essentially the cryptocurrency which cryptojacking is notorious for is Monero. So if you were to, for example, say that cryptojacking would generate 25 pence worth of Monero in a day, and then you could say, right, so will say that, they could quite easily push this out to 2,000 machines, and that's not difficult by any stretch of the imagination. If they were to push that out to 2,000 machines, that would be £500 a day they were generating. Then if you were to progress that across a year, that's £182,000 in a year. And, I think the key factor is people think, this is a victimless crime. Well, it's not a victimless crime. There are implications, such as, they're not just pushing it out to endpoint servers, mobile phones. They're also, provisioning additional resource for, in a virtual environment. And it's also the fact that, you kind of think, well, it's only taking a little bit of my CPU, but if you multiply that across an entire data center, then that's going to be, generating extra electricity. It's going to be generating extra air conditioning. It's going to, so the implications do have a knock-on effect.
And I suppose there's also where the proceeds of that go to. You don't want to assume that a lot of the people doing this probably aren't then using that income for good. They may be using it for other purposes around the world. So can have big implications, as you say, may have a detrimental impact at a smaller level across all of your servers and services where you want to be getting the value for those. I suppose once someone is in your system, that may be the primary use case, but it could have other use cases in terms of data and those other things as well. So Bitdefender made an acquisition, I believe, last year, which is coming into a new product with inside Bitdefender. Are you able to give us a little bit more information around that?
Certainly. So Bitdefender actually acquired a company called Red Sox in October of last year. And essentially this is network traffic analytics. We have now renamed Red Sox to NTSA, which is Network Traffic Security Analytics. And what we're doing is we're monitoring all of our network traffic. We are consolidating alerts. So, you are essentially alleviating the possibility of alert fatigue. So your SOC teams aren't being inundated with multiple alerts. They can create rules for whitelisting false positives and so on and so forth, so they can make sure that the alerts they are getting or are being brought to their attention are genuine alerts which need to be dealt with. And it's also bringing to your attention alerts on things such as payloads being delivered to bad neighborhoods, etc., making you aware of an indication of compromise, and that sort of side of things. So it's massively raising the awareness for the SOC team. You don't have to have a SOC team. We'll work in enterprise organizations as well as mid-market organizations, or anybody that wants to use it, essentially.
So this is basically using the power of all the devices where the Bitdefender is installed to be a network analysis tool to allow you to have the visibility of what's happening on that network, so you can understand compromise that's happened early. Am I correct in thinking that?
So essentially what it's doing is it's actually using span data, or what we also know as mirror data. It takes a copy of the span data, so it's not actually removing the span data at all, and therefore it will turn it into, convert it into IPFix, also known as metadata. So this is the data about the data. And it's actually looking at that sort of side of things and monitoring it. It isn't sitting in line, so it doesn't have an impact on the network traffic at all. So it's completely independent. It's basically a probe which sits alongside a switch, or just behind the firewall. So anywhere where traffic is leaving your network, you'll simply be analysing that sort of side of things, and then obviously it will raise awareness. The benefit of it and the beauty of it is the fact that you can generate rules as well. So if, for example, you're going to say, so this particular traffic is going to this known bad neighborhood, this destination IP we don't want anybody connecting to, you can essentially create a rule which can then get sent off to your firewall, which will just instantly block that traffic.
And will this help for things like IoT traffic? Because at the moment we're used to kind of protecting those kind of intelligent devices on our network, the devices with operating systems. But we are seeing increasingly, certainly at home with personal networks, but obviously even in the business, there is more and more IP-enabled devices coming on our network that simply don't have protection built into them. So does this give us any value around understanding the other types of traffic that's on the network?
It certainly does. I mean, for example, we do have detections where it was brought to our attention that a printer was connecting to the internet at 2 o'clock in the morning. and this was happening on a regular occurrence. It's called a heartbeat.
Okay.
And in investigating it, we could see that it was actually delivering a payload to a bad neighborhood. So it made us aware of the fact that we did have, a breach. But yeah, IoT is a massive thing out there. I mean, IoT this year is just going to grow in popularity. I mean, we've already seen a few high-level cases of IoT. For example, there was a recent breach where I think it was Jeep that were affected, where they actually managed to take control of the car and crash it. Right. There was a recent one where I forget the name of it, Medmere or something like that, where it took advantage of the fact that people had a broadband router, but they hadn't actually logged into that broadband router to change the
default password.
The default password. Yeah. So using that IoT, they could actually generate or orchestrate a DDoS attack on on websites. So it's very powerful in that respect. They've also IoT has been used, and such devices have been infiltrated, such as pacemakers. Which are connect to the internet, so the doctor can see exactly what's going on with a particular patient. They've actually infiltrated these. But I mean, these are threats which you would be astounded by. But it's the simple things which which we all have. We all have the organisations have for example CCTV cameras which have an IP address. So it's that sort of side of things where, if it has an IP address, it is, for example, broadcasting to the outside world. It doesn't necessarily have an operating system on which we can install an agent, but by raising awareness of this payload and the fact that this particular device is connecting to this, destination IP, then we can do something about it.
Definitely. Well, one of our customers that has quite a large SOC team spends quite a lot of time analysing any attacks that they get on their network. Security is of very high importance to them, and they had a repeated attack last year that, when they actually tracked it back to the source, was coming from IP-enabled kettles, and this gang was actually using IP-enabled kettles to specifically target their organisation. I think they found out that this gang was targeting 3 specific organisations around the world. They were one of those organisations. And it just goes to show, really, I mean, I think we all do have a responsibility for these IP-enabled devices. I think on this podcast we will be talking about the enterprise nature of that, and I like to think that the tools that you guys are now including help give us that visibility and things like that. But even in our personal life, I certainly know that my home has probably gone from having one IP address of a laptop many years ago to I've probably got 50 plus IP addresses running on my home network, which is absolutely crazy. So I think even in our home lives, we need to be considering the responsibility that we have to secure the devices that are part of our networks at the moment.
Very much so, and there's an awful lot of devices which we have in our homes which people don't even or people take for granted. For example, washing machines are now connecting to the internet, fridge freezers. I was back at InfoSec in June, and I was talking about IoT to a guy there, and he was actually the head of IT for Nando's, and he told me that all of their ovens connect to the internet, and I was like, wow, why? And he told me, and it was only when he started to explain the fact they can actually monitor the temperatures, because if they don't monitor the temperatures, then food burns. And that's loss of revenue for them. But then protecting that sort of side of things, you could have corporate espionage, or people just trying to take down Nando's, for example, because they're a rival company, and just so we're going to burn all their food, or we're going to hire someone to come in and do that sort of hijacking. So
I think there's even some white goods manufacturers that are basically including mobile phone systems inside their washing machines and things like that. Not because it's a smart washing machine, but in terms of a support perspective, for that one time they have to do a diagnostic, because the plan that you're able to get for these IoT enabled devices now, it enables them to offer a better level of customer service. So we do need to think of everything that's around. So the final question then, if you were speaking to an IT manager of a mid-sized organisation, maybe he's got some fresh concerns around security, he's recently experienced an outbreak or ransomware attack, what are the kind of basics that you would say to him to go and have a look at the security on his network, inside of his infrastructure, to start raising the bar of where he is?
So I don't think it's a single thing. I think it's got to be a combination of a lot of things.
Yeah.
Like I say, it's going to be network traffic. You need to be monitoring exactly what's going on, um, what your devices, what your end users are contacting, or which websites they're visiting, etc. Um, make sure your endpoints are up to date.
Mm-hmm.
Patching. Okay, that's really important. I mean, WannaCry, the reason why the majority of the NHS were hit by WannaCry was because either they were running Windows 7 machines which hadn't been patched, or they're running Windows XP machines. So, Microsoft incidentally didn't release a patch for Windows XP when the NSA made them aware of the fact that they had been breached in the month before the April. And yeah, make sure everything's up to date. Make sure you educate your end users that essentially they're going to be the weakest point in your organization. So if you can control what they're clicking, you can have control over the phishing emails or then connecting to particular phishing websites or whatever, then that's certainly going to strengthen your cause and ensure that you're protected every step of the way.
Definitely. Thank you so much for that. I agree. I think you've got to take a pragmatic approach to security. I think there are basics that you should be looking at, things like patching, things like having awareness, things like the permission levels people are having on their machines. Have you got antivirus out there? We run a service called CW Secure, where we help customers kind of put that pragmatic approach to security together. A lot of people kind of go all the way to a pen test to understand how secure they are. In my opinion, for most people, that's kind of a step too far too soon, because the pen test is going to come back and say you've got a multitude of problems. Where actually, if you take a pragmatic approach, you're able to probably get rid of 80% of those problems just by doing the basics that you should be doing. Patching, as you mentioned, there is the one that people always forget. Those that are patching the Microsoft stuff using WSUS don't realise that they're not patching the third parties that can be just as vulnerable, even more so than those Windows ones. So it's important to have these strategies in place to make you proactively staying on top of what's going on. Thank you ever so much for joining me on the To Find Tomorrow podcast today. Really enjoyed talking to you and look forward to speaking to you soon.
Thank you very much.
Bye.